Have you ever wondered how the past actually influences our present? We usually think we've left our old traumas and our past losses way in the rearview mirror, but sometimes life just weaves this incredibly intricate pattern where our deepest wounds unexpectedly collide with our future. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're looking at a truly poignant story about how invisible threads connect us across time, distance, and, well, even death. It's a striking case that's going to make you completely rethink the very concepts of family and fate. Let's get right into it.
I want you to think about this for a second. What happens when the child you adopt actually turns out to be a ghost from your own tragic past? What if the person you bring into your home hoping for a beautiful new beginning brings echoes of your absolute darkest days right along with them? Okay, let's dive into this. The story starts out ordinary enough, but the ending? It is so unpredictable it honestly feels scripted for a dramatic movie. But this is real life. And to really grasp the massive weight of the climax, we have to start at the very beginning.
Part 1. The Dream of Family, Building a Life Together.
Meet Lena and Pavel. They're a devoted young couple who seemingly had everything you'd need for a happy life. They shared interests, had a really deep understanding of each other, and they just bought this brand new apartment with an empty room, just waiting to be a nursery. But to understand their struggle to actually fill that room, we have to look at where they came from. It's a huge contrast. Lena grew up with modest means, sure, but she was surrounded by the absolute love and support of her single mother, who was a nurse. Pavel's childhood, on the other hand, was vastly different. He grew up in crushing poverty with a severely neglectful, alcoholic mother. He went through severe childhood trauma he literally refused to even speak about with his wife. And these completely opposite starting points, they profoundly shaped exactly how they viewed their future family. Their path to parenthood quickly turned into a grueling ordeal. This compresses 7 long years of pain into just a few milestones. Year 1 brought month after month of negative tests and growing worry. By year 3, they received a devastating diagnosis. Lena couldn't conceive naturally. Then came year 4, their first grueling IVF protocol. We're talking massive doses of hormones, colossal financial drains, sky-high hopes, and then crushing plunges into despair. By year 7, after multiple failed IVFs, they were just completely physically and emotionally exhausted.
Seeing his wife suffer so much, Pavel suggested an alternative. He brought up adoption. But Lena's reaction was categorical, driven by this pure, visceral fear. She told him, "I can't raise a stranger's child. Bad genes are a terrible force. Nothing good comes from kids abandoned in orphanages." Knowing the dark, broken environment Pavel himself had crawled out of, Lena was just terrified of bad genetics. She was utterly convinced there was no way she could ever love a stranger's child who carried the invisible baggage of their biological parents' past.
Part 2. An Impossible Coincidence, The Boy on the Screen.
Mentally shattered after yet another failed IVF, Lena started accepting a childless fate. That empty room was probably just going to become a home gym. But one day, out of sheer idleness at work, she casually browsed an adoption website. She clicked on the profile of a new boy named Egor, zoomed in on his photo, and literally froze. Staring back at her was an exact, miniature copy of her husband, Pavel. The unruly chestnut hair, the gray-green eyes, the distinctive freckles. But the most chilling part? The boy had this highly specific mole on his neck, absolutely identical to Pavel's.
So, the crucial point here is Egor's age. He was exactly 6 years old. Now, age isn't just a random number in the story. For Pavel, 6 is the precise age when his own life completely shattered into pieces. It was the moment he endured the absolute primary tragedy of his childhood, the one he had kept locked away for so long. Seeing that photo, the resemblance, the age, Pavel realized he had absolutely no choice. They had to meet this boy.
Let's move to part 3 and see how this all builds. The Lost Sister, a flashback to Pavel's childhood.
To really grasp the massive scale of what's happening here, we have to drop into the childhood Pavel tried so hard to forget. He had an older sister, Vika, who was just 2 years older than him. Their mother completely ignored them, so 5-year-old Pavel and 7-year-old Vika were essentially left to survive entirely on their own. They collected bottles just to buy food, huddling together in the freezing cold, and to escape that terrifying reality, they relied entirely on Vika's incredible imagination. She invented these vivid, beautiful fairy tales about a magical kingdom in the clouds just to keep them going.
But then things got worse. Uncle Tolya entered the picture. He was this incredibly cruel, harsh new stepfather. He decided to move the family to his place, but he absolutely despised little Vika.
He shouted at her, he beat her. The poor girl was in such a state of sheer animal terror around him that she literally couldn't even memorize the alphabet. So the stepfather handed down this unforgiving, devastating verdict. He said, "She's abnormal. I don't want to live with a retarded girl under the same roof. Put her in an orphanage."
Right as this was happening, Vika's 7th birthday was approaching. Little Pavel was desperate to support his sister before she was taken away. He went out and collected every single recycled bottle he could find. He only got enough money for a pastry and one cheap toy, a maroon plastic airplane. Vika had just heard the story of the little prince, so to her, this little airplane instantly became a talisman. Pavel handed it to her with tears streaming down his face, cementing this unbreakable promise of protection. He swore to her he would grow up, get strong, and come back to save her.
But a 5-year-old boy's promise is sadly no match for the cruelty of adults. The very next day, their weak-willed mother actually went through with it. She dropped Vika off at an orphanage, and Pavel was dragged away to a completely different city. He never saw her again. As he grew up, Pavel spent absolute fortunes on private detectives trying to track her down, but her trail had completely vanished. That immense, suffocating guilt of failing to protect his sister haunted Pavel every single day of his adult life.
Which brings us to part 4, the final piece, present meets past. Fast forward over 20 years to the present day, Lena and Pavel scramble to gather all their adoption paperwork and arrive at the orphanage to finally meet 6-year-old Egor. Now, the staff had warned them. They said Egor was a notoriously difficult child who threw huge tantrums specifically to scare off potential adopters. But when Egor walked into the room and saw Lena and Pavel, something inexplicable happened. He instantly calmed down, smiled, and just plainly declared, "I was waiting for you." It turns out he had intentionally sabotaged every single other adoption because he knew, somehow, those people just weren't his real family. Now, what's absolutely fascinating here is the talisman protecting him. That very first evening they brought him home, Lena tried to unfasten a cord around Egor's neck just to get him ready for bed. Egor stopped her and said, "Don't take it off, it protects me. My mom told me it's like a talisman. It's the airplane from the Little Prince." Pavel heard this, looked closer at the necklace, and his blood must have run ice cold. Dangling from that string was the exact same small maroon plastic airplane that Pavel had bought for his sister Vika over 2 decades ago. Later that night, Lena relayed everything she had read in Egor's confidential file about his biological mother. The details were staggering. The woman had grown up in an orphanage. She was incredibly kind, worked as a cook, read constantly, and loved her son deeply. Tragically, her life was cut short when a drunk driver hit her on a pedestrian crossing. That's how poor Egor ended up in the system. Hearing all these details, Pavel's wild suspicions began to grow into this pulsing hope, mixed with agonizing fear. Could it actually, literally be true? A few months went by, and Egor quickly became the absolute center of their world. Then came Lena's birthday. The boy proudly presented the secret present he'd been working on, a bright, hand-drawn picture. Delighted, Lena asked him to explain the drawing and who the characters on the page were. And as Egor started explaining, Pavel heard names that should have been utterly, completely impossible. Egor pointed to the drawing and said, "This is Boy Ray and Girl Giggles. My mom made them up. They live on a cloud and wait for the prince's airplane. Boy Ray and Girl Giggles? Those were the exact names of the completely made-up fairy tale characters Vika used to invent to comfort Pavel when they were freezing and starving as kids. There is no way anyone else on the face of the earth could have known those names." Egor then casually added that his mom promised a prince would one day fly to them on a red airplane. And this brilliantly illustrates the breathtaking reality of the situation. Every single, impossible puzzle piece just locked perfectly into place. The insane physical resemblance, the exact age, the orphanage background, the red plastic airplane, and finally, those unique, secret fairy tales. Egor was Vika's son. Pavel hadn't just adopted some random orphan. He had found his own nephew. He had finally found the blood family he spent his entire adult life desperately searching for.
Now, Pavel had actually secretly been saving up money to order a covert DNA test, just to be absolutely 100% sure. But after hearing those fairy tale names, he knew the truth in his bones. There was zero need for a medical test. The truth was completely undeniable. So instead, Pavel and Lena took those savings and used them to take Egor on his very first family trip to the sea. By raising her son, Pavel was finally fulfilling that lifelong promise to protect his sister.
It leaves you deeply moved, doesn't it? You really have to ask yourself, what led Lena to that exact website on that exact day? Why did Egor specifically wait for them? Was this all just blind luck and an astronomical coincidence? Or was the love between a brother and sister, a childhood promise forged over a cheap plastic airplane, so incredibly powerful that it defied time, defied death, and basically willed a family back together? Think about the invisible ties that bind us all. See you in the next explainer.